everyone. Welcome to the Match Slip Podcast. My name is Frank Angeloni, and on today's show, we're interviewing Mike Hall from Blade Gaming, located in Roanoke, Virginia. Mike is the GM of Blade Gaming, and he's joining us today to talk about his store. Mike, thank you for coming on to the show today.
Thanks for having me on.
My pleasure. So, Mike, if you could tell us a little bit about the founding of Blade Gaming, how it came to be, how long it's been around, any type of details you could tell us about its origin story.
So, Blade opened, we had a soft opening in October or November of 2018. The grand opening was in January 2019. It kind of come about, it was kind of a perfect storm. One of the owners worked for one of the big magic companies and had been let go from his job. And the other one had a board gaming club that he had been holding at his house for about 15 or 20 years that had kind of outgrown its welcome there. So at the time, they just kind of come up with the idea to open a store, and myself and a couple other friends all sat with them one Friday night after F&M and talked about stuff literally until the sun come up. Then a few months later, they're finding a spot, and we're doing all the prep to open the store. It was pretty crazy the way it happened.
Absolutely. And what is your role with being a GM at the store entail?
So we have right now we have 4 employees. There's 3 of us that are part-time and 1 is full-time. I oversee the day-to-day operations. I do all the product ordering, scheduling events, social media, pretty much anything that needs to be done at this point. I also help with a lot of the online sales because we have a pretty significant TCG presence.
And do you find these days most of your sales are coming from people coming into the store? Or do you find it's coming from utilizing TCG Player, as you mentioned?
It's probably 70-30 towards in-store purchases. We have a very diverse offering. We offer all the trading card games: Magic, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Battle Spirits, One Piece, My Hero, Academia, Flesh and Blood, Digimon, pretty much anything that's out there we offer a tournament for and we support in store. D&D is very big here. We actually have a 1,000 square foot room just for D&D. And then we also offer disc golf, which has been huge for us because there's a lot of good courses around. And a couple other small things here or there we do. Like we have, all the standard supplies and stuff like that. We have some specialty coffees and stuff like that. The TCG Player, the single sales, we're around, I think, 50,000 sales over the past few years. So it's a smaller segment of the business, but it is significant. So
what you were mentioning about like the golfing aspect. So you mentioned 2 things that are pretty unique from my side of the coin compared to what I've seen living out here on Long Island. The golfing aspect and the D&D dedicated room. We did have another store on the show, Comic Dimension, that had a D&D room. They were located in North Carolina. So what made you guys start a separate D&D room? And then how did the golf aspect come about to be? And do you notice, is the D&D the most popular segment of customers that you have showing up, or do the TCGs get their share of the play too?
So the TCG is king. They're like, we pack out every day that we're open with various TCG events. D&D come about because when we opened, the original goal was to give people a place to play TCGs like Pokemon, Magic, all that, and also board games. When we first opened, a group of people come in, they're like, hey, can we play D&D here? And we're like, sure. They grab a table and play. And it really just snowballed from there. It was real huge up until everything shut down in 2020. And as people started getting back out of their house last year, we expanded even more because we were able to get a whole nother part of the upstairs in our building from our landlords, and we turned it into just a D&D RPG board game. It holds around 50 people at max capacity. And on Sundays, that's our dedicated D&D day, and we usually pack it out. So it's been extremely popular. Then the disc golf is one of those things like we all just kind of play, and there wasn't really a store that had a large variety of disc here. So we just kind of jumped in head first, and I think we have 8 or 10 different manufacturers' disc on a shelf that we have. It's a whole corner of our retail part of our store. And it's been huge. We're actually hosting a couple tournaments this summer that are sanctioned through the disc golf league or whatever it is. So I typically stay out of that and let Tim handle that, but I know enough about it. So
And what are the turnouts for those events like as compared to, like, I know you mentioned D&D is definitely gets a high turnout and so do the TCGs. How's the turnout for the golf?
So the disc golf, we're having our first event in August. It has a 84 player cap. It's already probably a third of the way filled at this point, and we're still a couple months out. And we expect it to sell out. We actually did. It sounds crazy, but we did this thing that we called indoor disc golf league because we have a large play area. So what we did, we take all of our tables up and we would set up goals, and we have a net that we put in front of our window to catch the disc, and you would literally come in, pay a small fee that you get in a raffle and all this, but you would just throw disc across our store at different disc golf goals.
Could you describe a little bit about what disc golf is? I mean, this is something actually new to me. I'm not very familiar with it.
It's essentially golf, but with like disc, like frisbees. There's tons of different levels of them. A lot of the courses are out in like at parks in the woods and stuff like that. So you have to throw up the hill or around a tree or something crazy like that. But it works the same as golf. Like you still have like if this hole's par four, you still need to try to get it in four shots.
Okay, I see. Since you're holding multiple events, and I checked your Facebook page, I see you guys do run a lot of events concurrently, some of them with each other. How are you able to manage all of that, to have multiple events, whether it be, D&D or a TCG? How do you manage doing all of these events at the same time?
And so I have a excellent tournament coordinator on staff that's part time. He's actually a school teacher, so this is kind of like his hobby that he enjoys to do in the evenings. So we stagger the start times slightly, and he just handles it. He's been absolutely amazing, and we've been able to grow and do more tournaments at the same time because of his ability to manage a room from being a teacher.
That's very impressive. I'm sure that background helps him quite a bit. So I can imagine that the customer base must enjoy it too, because they have quite a wide variety at your store.
Oh, absolutely. Any given time, there's people in here playing. Saturdays are particularly crazy. We do Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, My Hero Academia, Digimon. People will be playing board games and D&D upstairs and whatever else they show up to play. Like we'll even have Magic players like a Pot of Commander show up and just sit off to the side and play. So it's a lot. But where we stagger the start times, it usually like Drew will put out like table numbers on tables and designate where people sit. So if they come for Digimon or One Piece, they know to sit in this row of tables, not to sit somewhere else. So it just kind of works. It's kind of amazing.
That's excellent. Do you find that there's a cross between the player base, like those that play board games, those that'll play Magic, or do you tend to find that they kind of stick to silos of what they play?
Mostly they stick to what they play. There is a little bit of cross. Some of the board gamers will pick up like a new card game like One Piece or Battle Spirits or something like that, or they'll have a commander deck or something. The D&D crowd is about 50-50. Some of them come in, they'll play D&D for a couple hours, then they'll come downstairs and play Magic until we close. So it's definitely, people do a little bit of everything.
I see. And with the card games in particular, Magic the Gathering is my favorite. That's what I play. And so I was kind of wondering, in terms of the TCGs, are there formats that are you've noticed from the player base that are most popular versus the ones that are maybe more difficult to fire? I would imagine Commander is one of the most popular since it seems like a lot of people these days play it, but I was curious in terms of a breakdown what you see on your side.
So right after everything reopened, Modern was huge. Modern Horizons 2 hit. We had 30 and 40 people show up every Friday for it. It just kind of dwindled down because I guess people just got bored of it, playing against the same thing, whatever. So it's really turned into every Friday we do a free commander, and once a month we do an actual commander tournament that we give away like a big chunk of store credit or prize like a complete bundle or something. And then we also fire a booster draft every Friday. Those are pretty much the only ones that are like consistent anymore.
And do you hold any higher level tournaments, like for, say, Magic specifically, like an RCQ or something like that?
Yeah, we still hold all the RCQs, pre-releases, everything like that. This is the weekly events. As far as competitive, it seems like Magic has shifted to a let's just hang out and have fun, where other games have really kind of taken off as far as competitive. Like we have a huge Yu-Gi-Oh community here, And we just started a new game called Battle Spirit Saga that's got people driving from like an hour and a half away to come play. So those type games have kind of taken off as far as competitive, but Magic's just it is really just hang out and play now. So
Sure. And the Spirit Saga is a new one for me. I haven't heard of that one before. What does that one entail?
it's a new game that Bandai came out with not long ago. It came out about a month ago. It's a pretty simple game. You use cores, kind of like mana. You get one a turn, so you never get like mana screwed or whatever. And you just you create characters on the field and you battle, but everything has affinity. So if you have more of a board presence, your stuff gets cheaper cost to cast, and you can just fight. They put a large chunk of money into professional backing for like the Grand Prix, Pro Tour type stuff, but it's extremely popular for us. That's like the newest, latest, and greatest thing right now.
And do you get to play any games at all while at the store? I'm sure it's probably difficult with, being the GM and having to manage the day-to-day operations, but I was curious if you had the opportunity to play ever yourself, since originally with the founding of the store, how you described it, how, you guys like to play games, you just bonded over that to start the store. I was curious if you still have any opportunity to play.
Every now and then, not consistent at all. Most of my gaming's at home with my family on my day off on Saturday, but so every now and then I'll jump into like a Thursday night Pioneer or a draft to make an even number, so there's not just a buy. I'll play pickup games here and there, but like as far as playing consistently, not at the store, not anymore. It's just too busy. There's too much that needs to be done. Like I'm always worried about what needs to be restocked, what do I need to order, or just kind of like talking with customers and doing stuff like that. So,
What do you enjoy playing when you do have your free time available to you?
oh, I'm a huge Magic player. I played professional level back in like 2000, 2002, in that era.
Oh, really? Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, I played. I used to grind all the time up until I had my son in 2008, and then I kind of backed away from it and just played local. But now with the store, it's just kind of like a whenever I can, which is not very often, honestly. So
I actually just played in an RCQ myself, so I also too enjoy the competitive nature of it. I didn't do very well, but I still enjoy playing in them. It was a Pioneer RCQ, and I played the Boros aggro deck with Feather the Redeemed, and I came up against blue white control too many times, and I just couldn't beat that deck at all.
yeah, that's a rough deck to beat with the aggro decks. So we actually have an RCQ next week, which is Pioneer also. I want to try to play. I play stuff like blue white spirits and like tempo type decks. So
I like that
yeah,
too.
it's this is fun, and especially because I think it has a pretty decent match against the blue white control stuff. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I know for me, I came across a lot of sweepers, like with Supreme Verdict, for example, and that was kind of like with an
Mm-hmm.
aggro strategy, I kind of had a really big disadvantage with that. But when you played on the Pro Tour, like, what formats were you playing? Were you playing in all of them back then, or were there certain ones you pick and chose which one you wanted to play?
Pretty much played them all. The one that I qualified for was extended format, which hasn't been a thing in probably 15 plus years now. So that was one of them. And then I kind of spiked a PTQ with a sealed deck. I hadn't played in like a year at the time. I just kind of walked in and got a busted deck and just kind of won. So it was just kind of random, but I prefer the older formats. Like I love Legacy. I love a format called Pre-Modern, and I really like Vintage. But I'll play anything. So
I too tend to like the older formats more. I'm just starting to build a deck with Legacy, and Modern is my favorite format. But what's pre-modern? Actually, I don't believe I've heard of that. I knew what extended was, but I'm not familiar with pre-modern.
Pre-Modern is it's kind of like a fan created format that got big, kind of like started getting big during the shutdown because everybody play online. It's a format. It starts at Ice Age in fourth edition and goes to Scourge. There's a small ban list like Force of Will and Brainstorm, stuff like that, just to kind of make the format fun. But it's a wide open format. It's actually pretty cool. You should definitely look into it sometime.
I definitely will. I appreciate you telling me about it. It sounds interesting. With holding these types of events at the store, are you guys one floor? Are you multi-floor? Like how big is the store?
So the store is around, I think, around 4,000 square foot. Most of it's downstairs. Our retail and our TCG area is downstairs. Our capacity is around 60 players comfortably. And then our upstairs is kind of designated as our D&D room. We actually have two rooms upstairs. One's bigger that holds around 40 to 50 people. And then we have one that we call the Forge that my wife actually painted a mural in, and it holds around 8 people. It's more of like a private area.
You said it's more like a private area, like almost like it could be reserved.
Yeah, absolutely. It's got a curtain around it. I mean, and it has a table to itself and lighting and everything.
That's very cool. How often do you notice new players coming into the store, or does it tend to be like the repeat customers that you tend to see maybe once a week or twice a week?
A lot of it's repeat. A lot of people really love our store just because when we set it up, we made it to be somewhere like if you're hanging out in somebody's man cave just playing games. Like we have all kinds of stuff everywhere on the walls. There's old D&D books. We have two murals that my wife did. She goes by Is It Star Altars, so some people that are listening may know of her. And then we have our namesake. We have blades all over the place, which is actually something that is unique to us because we have like katanas, warhammers, all kinds of stuff like that. And whenever you win an event, you get to wield the blade, and we post your picture on social media.
That's very cool. Nice little incentive, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I see a lot of people, a lot of regulars will, once we post the picture on our social media, they'll kind of like grab it and turn it into their profile pictures on their social media.
And so how do you guys deal with, because I was wanting to ask you about this, if you're able to discuss it at all, but with Star City Games also being in Roanoke, how does that all play out? Because I know they're a tremendous store. I haven't had them on the podcast yet, but I was curious how that works out in terms of like, because I know really all the game stores are in it together with each other. So there's not that, corporate level competition, but I was curious how you guys balance that out.
So we kind of do our own thing. We're more of the gamer store, hang out and just whatever with your friends. And they're more of like the corporate type store. There are players that bounce back and forth between both on different days because we typically stagger our events because we're all friends and it's a healthy competition. So people will like one day go there and then next day come here and so forth. So it works out. It's actually pretty good for everybody.
That's a great thing to hear because I've heard that even with the stores by me that they rotate their events so that they're not conflicting. Like if a store is running, say, Modern on a Tuesday, another store in the area will run it on a Wednesday instead so that it puts the customer flow going back and forth between the stores. So I think that's great that you guys do that too.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no reason not to. I mean, we're in it for the customers, for the gamers to have a place to go and do and just enjoy their hobbies. So by conflicting our schedules, it kind of hurts everybody. So we've always been cool and just we do this day, you do it that day, and everybody just goes where they go on those days.
When it comes to product and whatnot, in terms of selling, how do you deal with things like the pre-orders? Because I know that has to go through a distributor, and I know it's not just, TCGs that you're dealing with product for, but since you manage the day to day and you're part of placing the orders, how do you manage all that? Because I'm sure that could probably be the most overwhelming at times, at least from my standpoint. When I think about it, that would seem like the most overwhelming thing to me is to keep all that together. So I was curious about your process.
So I'm a supply chain manager at my full time job. I've been doing it for around 20 years. So it just kind of comes naturally to me because of that. I do kind of watch the ebbs and flows of business and kind of get some feedback from the customers. Like I'll ask them, be like, "Hey, what do you think about Lord of the Rings?" Or "Hey, what do you think about this?" Or and kind of listen to what they say. And if they sound excited, I may order a few extra cases or something, but if people are like, whatever, I'll back down a little bit on my ordering. So it's kind of just paying attention to the customer and kind of what they're interested in and just going from there.
And how likely is it that you'll get the amount of product that you ask for? And I ask because I've heard, whether it be from YouTube or other stores, that what you ask for from the distributor, you may not get the full allocated amount. I was curious if that's the case from your experience with every store. And I'm sure with the purchasing stuff, like you said, from your background, I'm sure that must help a ton with working at Blade. So when it comes to making those orders in terms of getting limited from a distributor level, is that always the case, or is it really dependent upon the size of your store? Because your store is pretty big from what you've described to me.
Yeah, we're I would consider us a medium level store. We do sell a lot of product. I use three different distributors. I have a primary for each game, and then like a secondary and a like the other guy. So I'll place one big order here, a moderate order here, and a smaller order here. That way, if stuff does get kind of allocated down into nothing, I still have these other orders coming to kind of like pick up the slack. The biggest issue I'm seeing is the sets this summer are pretty allocated. Lord of the Rings numbers are kind of less than what I asked for. And then the Commander Masters is going to be very, very, very short printed from what I've been told from all of the distributors. And then the big one, which is the Disney Lorcana game, I ordered like hundreds and hundreds of boxes from both of the distributors, and they both told me to expect like a trace amount of what I ordered.
And I guess there's not a way to, like, with whatever they give you, there's not a way to then circle back with them at a later time to see if they could provide more, or is it usually just ordering what is available at the given time and that's really all there is?
So most product, you get your initial release, and then a week or two later, you can typically find it at one of some distributor will have some extra where like another store canceled an order or they got 10% more than what they thought they were or something like that. So most things you can find. There are some like One Piece that was just you just couldn't get it, and I feel like Disney's going to be kind of like you're not going to get it unless you place a gigantic order type thing. So
Sure. And you mentioned One Piece there, and I talked to Zulu's games out in Seattle, Washington recently, 2 episodes ago, and they were talking about One Piece and the success that they had with it. And I know you mentioned the TCGs are, the king in terms of the popularity with them. Are you seeing the same thing in Virginia with the popularity of One Piece?
So the popularity's there, but the player base kind of isn't. When I get the product, it literally vanishes. The player base, at least here, is there's about 10 to 12 people, but they kind of gotten bored of it right now. I think they're just waiting on set three to come out and then we'll play more. But it's kind of like, hey, you got any product? No, okay, well, we'll check back. And then maybe some of them will show up for the event, and some of them were kind of like, I'm going to do other stuff today.
You kind of envisioning it as like, or seeing it come about like the way I've always kind of seen Pokemon be, less people tend to play the game and more people tend to buy it for the collection aspect of it. Is that what, from your end in Virginia, what you're seeing with One Piece, almost that dichotomy?
Yeah, from our store perspective, yeah, I'm kind of seeing that. And you are absolutely correct about Pokemon. For every 100 people that come into the store and buy Pokemon, 95 of them just collect it. The player base is very small. It's very dedicated, but very small. And I feel like One Piece is probably going the same route.
Is there a reason you could surmise why Pokemon tends to be that way? I've always wondered that, and that goes back to even when I was a kid, because the first ever card game I collected was Pokemon. I didn't play it. I just collected it at the time until I found out about Yu-Gi-Oh! So I was always interested in the fact that, because I'm 35 now, and the fact that that has carried on to that same aspect till this day, that it's more of a collection than an actual gameplay. I'm curious why that is.
I think it's just because a lot of people just like the characters and they just want to have like all the Charizards or something like that. And a lot of them just aren't gamers. They just kind of like really just like the cards. So they'll come in, they'll want like the newest Charizard or the newest full art trainer or something like that. So
Okay, kind of very similar to whether like collecting an action figure almost.
yeah, essentially.
And you said Yu-Gi-Oh was though very popular, and there's a very highly competitive player base for that. What type of tournaments are run for that? Because it's been a long time since I've played Yu-Gi-Oh. It's not something I play anymore. We didn't really have formats for Yu-Gi-Oh back when I was playing it, so I'm curious what that kind of is like today.
Yu-Gi-Oh's changed quite a bit. It always had a stigma around that game. It was kind of like the one where everybody is kind of whatever. And our community is extremely good. It's a bunch of 20 and 30-year olds. There's a few teenagers that play. They're very competitive. They all travel for YCS tournaments, which is like a Grand Prix for Magic. There's three formats that we play now. There's advanced format, which is standard, which their standard's kind of an eternal format. And then we play Edison once a month, and then we also play what we call Goat once a month, which is like 2004, 2005 only cards. But they're extremely competitive. They buy a ton of product, and they really love our store. They'd always kind of like been pushed out of everywhere for other events, and we made a promise to them that like Saturday's their day, and they responded in kind. And we get 30 and 40 people tournaments almost weekly on Saturday.
That's great to hear. It's nice to see that they also reciprocated, the effort that you guys are putting in to give them a place to play, and they're returning the favor and providing the business for the store. So that's great that they have the ability to play. I know for me, once I learned about Magic in, I think it was maybe 2002 when I first started playing. And the minute I found out about that, the artwork I loved, I thought the game was a lot more difficult and challenging, and it just kind of took over for me. I don't know if it was like that for you, if your involvement with Magic was a similar transition that you started off with one game and then went to Magic. That's mine. I was curious if that was a similar path from your end as well.
It really was. My personal story for Magic is actually kind of funny. I discovered it in 1994 between the sets of Legends and the Dark. We were skateboarding somewhere where we weren't supposed to, and we took off running and jumped in a friend's car, and I knocked over a box of cards, and while I was picking them up, I was like, hey, what is this? And the friend was like, it's a new game called Magic. I'll teach you how to play. And it just kind of went from there. It became all consuming for a very long time. And that's just kind of where it's at.
I know the feeling. It's very hard to stop once you're ingrained in it. And I know for you, you almost had no choice because now you're working in the field, so your time is more consumed. How much would you say you miss grinding the events and playing competitively?
I at this point I really don't. It was fun at the time, but I've got so much other stuff going on now that it's one of those like when I do try to play like an RCQ or something, I almost feel guilty because I need to be doing this or I need to be doing this. I guess the grown up part of life just kind of gets in the way. Most of the enjoyment I get out of Magic anymore is hanging out with the family and just playing Commander because we play like these big 8-person Commander with plane chase, insane games on Saturdays. And that's kind of like where my enjoyment for the game comes now.
That's great. At least you have an alternative way to play it now. I know the feeling. Yeah, as you get older, it becomes harder and harder to find the time to play. I was grateful that I was able to play in the RCQ tournament. I haven't played in a competitive tournament in a very long time. And so it was fun to just to get to do it again. And when you're playing Commander at home, I would imagine that's very unique. The 8-player pod Commander tournament. I'm guessing those tournaments can go pretty long.
Well, it's usually just one giant game. So it's me and the wife and my son, one of his friends, it's always over. She has 4 kids, and then her cousin and some other friends will come over. So, like, it gets kind of crazy at times, but it's very fun.
I actually want to get into, I keep saying this, I want to get into Commander more myself. I have built decks. It's always been a hard thing for me to transition to because I'm so used to playing 1v1. And as somebody like yourself who's
Mhm.
played in, pro level tournaments, how difficult do you feel that was for you to adjust to now, okay, I'm not just playing against one person, now I'm playing against 3 other people that I have to pay attention to.
It's not really a hard adjustment. I just play the most degenerate deck I can and just try to win as fast as I can. So they all kind of get mad at me. It's a thing. And also at the store, we do we call it King of the Hill. It's basically a commander tournament that we run once a month. It's been wildly popular. We pair everybody up into random pods, and then you have 2 hours to play the first one. And if you win your pod, you move on to the next round. And then if you win the second round, you move on to the finals, and that's where we give away a bunch of promos and store credit and all that to the winner.
That's a fun concept. Do you find it tends to be random who's winning each time, or does it tend to be the same people who are, normally the really good players that are winning, or is it a good even split, do you find?
It's mostly the same people at the top tables, but there are randoms that'll come in and play one month and then come back the next month and just be like, just ran like crazy stuff and just kind of win.
With the store itself where the tournaments are being held, I know some stores do this, or I guess I'll start off with, are you guys a WPN premium or are you just regular WPN?
We're just regular WPN. We looked at the premium. We would have to eliminate a lot of our atmosphere in the store to achieve WPN. Like we already have all the matching tables, chairs, all that. But with that, we can't have a lot of the decorations that we have on the walls. And we feel like that's a big part of the store. And we don't really, the atmosphere outweighs the small benefits of being a premium store.
Okay, I see what you're saying. And the decorations you have probably aid towards like the theming of the store as an overall. Does your store have like a specific theme? Because I know there are some stores that go all out and they have this very, large thematic aspect to them, like Zulu's games, who I had brought up earlier. I was curious, do you guys do an element of that based on what you're saying?
We do. It's like the thing with the blades. That was one of the first things they told us that we couldn't have because we literally have like katanas and battle axes and just all kinds of weapons all over the place that are secured to the wall. And that's something that has to go. We also have like really old magic posters and Pokemon flyers and stuff like that on the walls. And we were told those would have to go also. So we're kind of like, getting a promo card with our name stamped on it or having all this cool stuff that people walk in and they're like, wow, this is neat. So we kind of we lean towards the atmosphere more.
Yeah, it seems like what you're describing, that the benefits of being premium don't really outweigh what you have to do to get there, because it's almost like you're having to rearrange your store to be almost like a shell of what they're looking for it to be, I guess.
Yeah, essentially. And it would just take too much away from what we're doing to go down that route.
Yeah, no, I completely understand that. I definitely would love to come down to the store one of these days, make it out to Virginia to see it. It sounds very cool what you're describing to me.
Oh yeah, you'd love it. It's always people hanging out, so you can always find a game of about anything you want to play, and this is people just kind of like stay around. So, which is what we set out for, because we want to give people a place to go and hang out and be who they are and do what they like. So,
Yeah, it's a fun time. It took me a long time to find the game store that I really enjoyed playing at. I've had, ones that I've went to over the years. My original game store when I was, a teenager, went out of business at the time. So once I found the store I liked playing at, it was pretty cool getting to see myself going back there, every week pretty much to continue to play. And it seems like you guys are cultivating that same thing to continue to repeat customers to come back and play at the store. So it seems like you guys have a really good layout and plan for that.
yeah, absolutely. It's really the community. It's a community based store. I know that's probably cliche to say, but there's so many people that we see almost on a daily basis doing a different game. It's kind of crazy at times.
I bet. Yeah. And with the players that you have returning to the store, I know there's a lot of people in Roanoke, Virginia that play, professionally, back either when SCG invitationals, were a thing. I know it's more of just SCG cons now, or, any type of competitive
Hmm.
play. I know there's a few of them that I could think of off the top of my head that live out there. And I'm guessing you probably see some of them coming to the store. Like, for instance, I know I had reached out when I found out about Blade Gaming. I had reached out on Twitter to some people in the area, like Brad Nelson had recommended you guys to me.
Yeah, we definitely see a lot of the pro level players like Brad Nelson, Todd Anderson, Ross Merriam. There's all kinds of them that come through. It's really a lot of them will stop in when they're not traveling, or they're not doing other stuff on weekends. So it's very hit and miss, but we do see them quite often.
That's very cool. Yeah, Todd Anderson also recommended me to you guys to reach out. So I'm definitely glad they put me in touch, because this is sounds just like a fascinating store. And I've been to Virginia before multiple times. So I definitely am
Hmm.
gonna make it a point to come visit you guys. Would love to do like a video profile of the store to check it out, maybe play some games as well.
Oh yeah, that'd be awesome. Anytime, man.
I appreciate it. So, when it comes to promoting the store and getting your name out there, is Facebook your number one use for promoting the store? Do you do conventions or anything like that?
We do some conventions from time to time. Mostly it's Facebook. There's three of us that post on there, so we can continually add content. As crazy as it sounds, just stickers that people take and put on deck boxes or T-shirts that they wear to larger events and stuff. People just see that, and when they're traveling through, just kind of stop in and check the place out.
That's cool. So you've found something that connects with the people. And, especially with just having like stickers. I mean, I know it sounds like nothing, but just to have your brand on there, whether they're playing locally, but even when they bring it to like a convention, like a Magic Con or a Command Fest, it helps really get the name out there for the store.
Oh, absolutely. Actually, when we were getting ready to open, I'm a pretty avid Pokemon Go player, and I had a backpack that I would just have like a pile of stickers in, and we'd show up to do like a raid, and I would just hand stickers out to everybody. I still see those stickers that we haven't made in years on cars driving all over the place.
Do you find that selling on TCG Player, how is that in terms of from a financial standpoint for the store? How is that in terms of the business side of things?
It's essential. It allows us to have a kiosk in store that people can come in and search thousands, like hundreds of thousands of cards instead of just cards in a display case. I know the display cases are they have a lot of eye appeal, but when people start looking at the kiosk, they're like, wow, you have tons of everything. It's kind of a bigger impact. And then the online sales have been huge for us. It's actually part of what floated us through the COVID shutdown. And it also allows us to buy collections and not have to worry about it because we know we can just put it online and somebody's going to buy it.
I'm guessing it's very good to have that extra cushion there as a supplement to the business rather than having to only rely on people coming in the store.
Yeah, absolutely. Any small store that doesn't have a TCG presence or their own website or anything like that absolutely needs to have it. It really enables you to have a larger inventory that continually rotates and to have more reach to more people. Like we've had people come in from out of town and they'd be like, "Yeah, I bought cards from you once on TCG, so I figured I'd stop by since I was traveling through." So it's very essential.
I'm glad to hear you guys are doing because I have heard of stores that don't do it, and I too also agree with you that they're missing out if they're not doing it. Because with bringing in that extra revenue, now you have the ability to offset the costs that are involved with running a business. And I would imagine your overhead would be either payroll or the purchasing of the product. But based on what you've described with the number of people that work at Blade, it seems like the product would be your biggest cost. I was curious if that is the case or not, or if it's a combination of other things.
Mostly product. We don't skimp on anything, and we have a very wide selection of stuff. I have a whole aisle dedicated to nothing but RPG stuff, like hundreds of sets of dice, and then blind box minis and unpainted minis and books and just everything involved in that. And then I have a whole section on one of our walls that's nothing but Gundam models, and a whole section that's nothing but like nano block Pokemon things and like anime statues. And then we have a whole section. We have a rack of Citadel paint, and then a whole corner of our store is nothing but disc golf. We probably have like a couple thousand discs over there. So we definitely don't skimp on inventory or anything. We try to keep everything in stock as much as we can, just so when people walk in, they're like, "Holy crap, this store has everything!" They don't really want to go anywhere else.
You definitely have quite a variety for customers to choose from and, games to play, products to buy. And I was kind of curious, is the board game scene popular at your store?
So we sell a lot of board games. We used to have a 1,500 game library where people could come in and pay like a day pass, like a sitting fee basically, and just play board games all day. We'd have like expensive games like Blood Rage and stuff like that that are very complex and expensive where they could try them out. That was very big for us pre COVID. And during that time, it seems like a lot of people just bought these games. And afterwards, it's more of a people just come in and buy games. It's not as much of the people just hanging out playing the games out of our library. But it is still popular, just in a different way.
The popularity of people coming in to play TCGs, more people are maybe buying the board games and rather playing them in the store, but you have the option if it's wanted.
Correct. Yeah, it's just so many people bought so many board games from us during shutdown that I guess a lot of them just find it hard to justify coming and paying us to sit here and play when they have them at home. But the D&D thing is huge, so it kind of offsets everything.
With having a full-time job yourself, how do you find doing that plus a part-time job? Because I can imagine that that's very time consuming. And I know you mentioned you have Saturdays off. So how do you balance the two? And from what you've described earlier on, it definitely seems like your background helps aid in this job. And is it something you would eventually want to transition into doing Blade full time?
I would love to do full time at Blade. We're just not quite at the point where it's affordable for us. It is a lot of work. It is definitely a labor of love to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, go to my full time until 2 o'clock, and then be here by 3 and work till 10. It is definitely something that I wouldn't do if I didn't love it. So it's definitely a thing.
What have you found from your full-time job that outside of buying product that's helped you the most with Blade?
Just being able to communicate with the customers and kind of build relationships with them. My full time, I'm a supply chain manager, but I'm inside of a manufacturing facility and I order all their product that they need to make their stuff that they manufacture. So through that, I would have to learn people and kind of like learn how to talk to them and small talk stuff like that, and be able to build a friendship of some sort with them. And it's helped a lot with this.
I'm sure the interaction piece helps quite a bit since working in a game store is very customer facing. And so are you out in front in the customer front of the store during most of the time? I didn't know if you had other employees that handle that. And since you're doing the day-to-day stuff, I didn't know if you have to then work in an office when you're at the store.
So most of my time here is spent at the counter. I do enjoy it. I probably need to be doing other stuff, but I actually enjoy talking with the customers and just kind of listening to their stories about their games and just kind of seeing everybody have fun. I do have my tournament coordinator, Drew, who also works a storefront. And then the other two, Tim does all of our online stuff, and then we have a person that does like sorts all of our cards and helps Tim out upstairs in our inventory.
It seems like you got it all covered. I mean, all the various pieces that you would expect a game store to have, you guys definitely seem to have it all fleshed out with everybody, working on a particular piece of the business that they're specializing in, which I'm sure helps.
Oh, absolutely. It gets overwhelming at times. I won't even lie. But we all just kind of work together well, and just everything just falls into place, and everybody has a good time.
What would you say is the most stressful thing with running a game store?
Too many products coming out. It's like every week there's something new, and I'm always nervous that I'm going to miss something. It's one of those like, holy crap, this is coming out this week. Did I order that? Hopefully, I can get more because we're like, this is going to be really popular, and stuff like that. That's the biggest stress, and the margins aren't they're not super, so like it could be better, but we're doing really well. So that's kind of like the only things we ever stress about.
I've heard not only from stores but also the player base. Everybody has that same feeling: is that the product amount is a lot and it's hard to track. How do you guys try to handle that on your side? And do you think that it's sustainable for this amount of product, not from the company standpoint that's producing the product, but from the standpoint of a store? Is there a point you feel where that almost becomes like a real barrier or disadvantage to, running things as smoothly as you may want?
Mostly the space. There's just too much stuff. I always order enough to where we cover our pre-orders and what we expect to sell right out the gate, and then to also have some on the shelf for a long term. Because it's one of the things like our behind our counter, we have like dozens of boxes of packs of cards of all types, and a lot of people walk in and are like, "Oh wow, you have so much stuff!" And it kind of like gets that wow factor, which we enjoy seeing people react to it. It's just too much stuff. Then the wallet fatigue is very real in players. I have a lot of players that completely skipped the aftermath set from Magic and like went real light on Marching Machine,
Hmm.
and but they're waiting for Lord of the Rings to hit, and they're already like, I've placed, orders for 5 boxes of this, but I'm not buying any of this other stuff because I'm waiting for this. So it's a very real thing, and they do need to back off. All of them, not just Magic. Like Yu-Gi-Oh releases something almost every month. Pokemon seems like every other month right now. It's just a lot of product in general for this like business.
I mean, especially coming from what you and I remember the game being, which was, one set No, actually 4 sets. What was it, in total a year, and maybe you might get a supplemental product?
Yep. It's just too much. Even with that, I think the absolute worst part is like 6 versions of every card. It's nerve wracking. There's times when people were selling collections, I'm like, what is this card? And then I'll read it and I'm like, oh, okay. I've never seen this version of it before. So it's very nerve wracking with that. So,
And I can imagine too with filing all that stuff, for sale and having it requires more of checking of various prices because the art's different or the frame is different. Just a lot of work from your end as well.
oh, absolutely. That's one part I'm very glad that I don't have to do very often.
Well, that's good. At least you get a break from that.
Yeah, definitely.
My final two questions here are one related to pre-release. So, from Magic the Gathering standpoint, you could feel free to go into other pre-releases with Yu-Gi-Oh, One Piece, Flesh and Blood, whichever you prefer going down. But I was curious in terms of pre-release, what the turnouts are like for that, because I know that's one of the most
Mhm.
popular events for players to attend. It's one of my absolute favorite ones to attend outside of playing in like a modern constructed or pioneer constructed event or draft, all the other events that are involved with Magic, but pre-release, there's something I always love about that. Granted, it's new cards, but I've always found it to be probably one of the most fun events. And I was curious what the turnouts are like at Blade and what your response you see from the players is like around pre-releases.
So our pre-releases are rather large for most sets. It's very casual, and we see a lot of people that we don't see at any other time. So they'll come in, they'll play, like we do a Friday night pre-release, a Saturday pre-release, and then we do a two-headed giant on Sundays. So there's a variety of times and different format of pre-release for them. We see certain people on Friday for pre-release that we don't see any other time. Then there's people that we see every single day. Then there's some people that come in only for the two-headed giant. But a lot of those people, some of them are regulars that we see all the time, but a lot of them are like people that only come in to play with the new cards, and then they'll buy a box or a bundle or something like that to go along with. So it's definitely a big spike for the store. The other games are about the same. Pokemon usually brings in a lot of people that don't play week to week for the pre-release. Yu-Gi-Oh's pretty consistent. They play all the time, so whenever they do a pre-release for that, it's a little bit different. It's called like a premiere event. Basically, instead of doing a sealed deck tournament, you can just come in and spend like $23 or something like that and get 5 packs of the new set plus an exclusive like promo type thing. And you can just do that over and over and over and over again. But we also run an event where we give away like promotional stuff for that set. Flesh and Blood brings in a lot of extra people. We have a pretty strong community in that, but for the pre-release, we get some of the ones that we don't see consistently. So the pre-releases are very, very good for stores. We always look forward to them. I know the Lord of the Rings set for Magic is we expect to be completely packed out for that pre-release.
I can't tell you how overly excited I am for that pre-release. That's my one of
Oh
my
yeah,
favorite
that one looks
movies.
awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it looks great.
definitely.
So, yeah, what we have with our store, and I wonder if it's like this at Blade too. Do you guys see people from other formats that choose to come to the pre-release? So, for example, we tend to have, I was asking my store owner because I see people at pre-release, like kind of what you were saying that I don't normally see. So I don't just play in pre-release. I'll be there for, occasional constructed event. I'll be there for drafting mostly. But we see at pre-release a mix of people that like I mentioned, I won't normally see. And it turns out it's a cross between people like that play Commander that like to play only in the pre-release events, like we won't see them for draft, for example. So I'm curious if Blade has that kind of melding of the two like format groups together like that.
Somewhat. A lot of the Commander players, the only time they'll play anything other than Commander would be a pre-release. A lot of the competitive constructed players don't play sealed in any form. It's very strange. It's like they may come in, but they usually don't. But definitely the Commander people and definitely the randoms that don't play consistently, like maybe just play at home or something. That's the majority of the field for a pre-release.
I'm guessing the competitive players more prefer draft.
Yeah, mostly, but the ones that we don't really see for the pre-releases are the ones that play like competitive modern and stuff like that still travel for RCQs and stuff. It's a pretty weird dynamic. So.
That's interesting. Yeah, not something I would have expected to hear. But my last question here for you is related to the uniqueness of the store. So, what is one thing that you would say that's unique about the store? And what's one like wishful goal for the store that you would like to see happen in the future?
The uniqueness is the atmosphere. Like I said earlier, we have a couple gigantic murals that were done by my wife, the blades on the wall. We're also in downtown Roanoke, and we have a brewery attached to the backside of our building, and there's also two or three more within like a block's walk. So yeah, we're pretty unique in that fact. As far as what my wish list, honestly, I would like a bigger facility. Even though we have like around a 4,000 square foot store, I would love to be able to expand it even more one day and offer even more stuff.
That's a great goal. I can imagine as time goes on, product builds up, customer base fills up. It's almost like you're thinking to yourself, it's time to expand the store. And I know cost is heavily involved in that, but that would be a great thing, I would imagine, to get to see in the future.
Oh, absolutely. It's just the biggest part is finding somewhere. The hardest part opening the store initially was finding a location. We actually got pretty lucky because they were doing a revitalization project where we're at when we opened, and we got into our building pretty cheap. And everything around us has kind of sprung up since we started here.
Is that the only location Blade Gaming has had, or have you been at another location prior?
Just the one location so far. We always look. Everybody loves this place, and we're comfortable with where we're at. But it never hurts to look. So every now and then we'll just kind of pull up buildings for sale on the internet and kind of see what's out there.
That's great to hear. Well, Mike, it's been an absolute pleasure getting to talk with you. I've enjoyed hearing about the store. I look forward to coming to visit in the very near future. Where could people listening find the store online and interact with what you guys have to sell with Magic cards, Flesh and Blood, or any other game?
We're on TCG Player as Blade. That would be the best place to buy the singles and stuff. As far as interacting with us directly, our Facebook page, which is Blade Gaming Inc. We're very active in replying to messages. We post a ton of stuff on our social media. So if you ever want to kind of like check out what we do or see pictures of the store, see like the people with the blades after they win events, stuff like that, that would definitely be the place to find it.
Excellent. And I'll be sure to add a link to the Facebook page in the show notes. Again, Mike, I want to thank you again for coming on.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for having me on.
My pleasure. And for everyone else listening, if you enjoyed this episode, I invite you to join our newsletter at thematchslip.com/newsletter. And we will see you on the next interview with another local game store. Take care.